Okay, guys, today we're going to start talking about arthropods. We've worked our way from simple to complex through a good portion of the phyla in the animal kingdom. Just like the ones we've talked about so far, arthropods are invertebrates. Invertebrates, if you remember, don't have a backbone. So if you look here, we have a whole bunch of subphyla of the arthropod group. Arthropods are the largest group of invertebrates and they have the most diversity. Think about even beetles. There's 60,000 different kinds of beetle species. So all the different kinds of invertebrates, including arthropods, way outnumber the different kinds of vertebrates on planet Earth. But vertebrates tend to be bigger and usually cuddlier, unless you feel like cuddling up with arachnids. Me, not so much. I have no interest in you memorizing this, but I just want you to look at the diversity of the arthropod group. So everything from lobsters and crabs to different kinds of insects to centipedes and millipedes, which look more like worms, and even to trilobites, which are extinct now, but we do have a ton of fossil evidence of those guys. So what makes an arthropod an arthropod? All arthropods have bilateral symmetry. So if you remember, we can draw a line right down the middle and it will separate the body into two mirror images, two halves that are equal. These guys also have segmented bodies, jointed appendages, and an exoskeleton. So they're crunchy on the outside and squishy on the inside. Arthropod actually means jointed leg. Arthro, joint, pod, foot or leg. So arthropods are jointed legs. Their appendages are jointed. That's one of the easiest ways to tell arthropods apart from any other kind of invertebrate. We subgroup these or classify them by the kind of body parts that they have. Their number of legs, that's one of the easiest ones. Their types of eyes and their types of antenna. You can tell I'm recording at school because the bell just went off. Antenna, as most of you probably know, are the little feelers that sense touch, taste, and smell for our arthropod friends. So just a quick image here to look at some differences between even crabs and shrimp, which are often in the same group. We can see their segmented bodies, different parts here. Their exoskeleton, this is the development of a crab from juvenile to adult. Same thing for a shrimp. Even still, they have segmented bodies here and here. They have jointed appendages, their little legs here. Their tail almost appears to be jointed. And their exoskeleton, which is on the outside. So the 5 groups that we're going to be looking at, mostly focusing on the first 4, are centipedes and millipedes, crustaceans, arachnids, insects, and then trilobites. I left those off to the bottom because they're extinct. They are one of the 5 main groups of arthropods, but you're not going to see them outside of a museum or a science center in fossilized form. So our first group, remember we always work from simple to complex, are the centipedes and millipedes. So these guys have just one pair of antennae. They have a hard head that helps them dig into the ground. One pair of mandibles. Those are chewing mouth parts or piercing, sucking mouth parts. So these guys are going to be eating other small critters, other little insects and things like that. The best way to tell the difference between centipedes and millipedes are by counting their legs. I don't love to get super close to these critters because they're kind of creepy looking. But if you look at this top left-hand picture, you can clearly see the different body segments. The coloring allows us to tell the difference pretty easily. And you can see that they have one left and one right leg on each segment. So one pair of legs per segment. That makes this a centipede. Unlike their name might suggest, they don't actually have 100 legs, nor do millipedes have 1,000 legs. Milli means 1,000, but millipedes have 2 pairs of legs per segment, so they just look like they have like 1,000 legs. They don't actually have 1,000, but they have a whole bunch more legs than a centipede would have. These guys are darker colors that helps them camouflage better. The bright color would suggest that these guys are toxic, and they are, to birds and things like that. I don't recommend you eat them either. That's really gross, but their bright coloring is to help fend off predators, to tell those predators, you don't want to eat me, I am poisonous, and they are. Crustaceans, which sometimes I call crusty skins, they live mostly in the water, and accordingly they have gills for breathing that are tucked under their exoskeleton. When we dissect our crustacean this week, we're going to do crayfish. We'll be able to see the really complex, pretty gills that live under their skeleton. These guys also have mandibles for eating and antennae. They have 2 pairs of antennae rather than 1. And they also have some compound eyes. That means they're getting more than one picture in each eye. So it's an advantage when they're looking to avoid being eaten by other little critters in the water. So common crustaceans that you'll see are shrimp, barnacles, crabs, lobsters, the crayfish that we're going to be dissecting. Lots of fun ocean critters. Here's just a quick image of the crayfish. So we're going to be doing more with this when we get into the dissection, but just take a note of their body parts. Make sure you record all of them. They are broken into 2 body parts. A cephalothorax, much like a spider has a cephalothorax, and then an abdomen, or most people call it a tail, but it is an abdomen. So the cephalothorax, the head mid-body part, and then the abdomen. You can see their little eye stalks are tucked in, protected under the front part of their cephalothorax. The very tip of that is called the rostrum. The very other end of their body is called the telson. That's the last little segment of their abdomen. They have 4 walking legs on each side, so 4 pairs of legs, and then they have a large claw on one side and then a slightly smaller claw on the other side. That claw part is called a cheliped. Some people call it a cheliped, potato, potato. It's still a claw part. That's going to help them grab their food and bring it in toward their feeding appendages, which just move food into their mandibles. You can see they have 2 pairs of antennae. They have a long pair and then a short pair. Here's some internal structures. We'll refer back to this. One of my favorites is the green gland. In real life, it's not green at all. It's actually pink. So the colors are just here to help you differentiate the different structures. They don't have any blue parts in their body, but they do have a nerve cord that is lightish gray, just like the worm nerve cord that we saw that runs along the bottom or ventral side of their body. They also have a blood vessel, just like our worm had, that runs along the top or dorsal side of their body, and we'll be able to see that. There's a more realistic picture. You can see the green gland here is not green at all. It's pink. This is their digestive structure here. And then a whole big muscle. When people eat crayfish or crawfish, if you're from the South, that muscle piece is what they're eating. Some people suck out the head. Their stomach is actually in their head. That's really gross. They're filter feeders. They eat garbage. Don't suck out the heads. That's really gross. Just eat the meat part, the muscle part in their abdomen. That's what most people are eating. We'll look more at the internal structures when we do our dissection on Wednesday or Thursday. Our third group is the arachnid group. This is probably my least favorite group. I'm totally creeped out by spiders, but they're not the only critters that live in here. Arachnids have 2 body parts similar to the crayfish structures that we saw, a cephalothorax, which is the top and mid part of the body, and then an abdomen, which lots of people would call a tail. Most of these critters have 8 legs. They have claw-like mouth parts called chelicerae. which makes them look a little extra creepy. And that's the part that when a tick bites you, and a tick is an arachnid, he's right down here, that chelicerae mouth part is what bites and grabs onto you. And we have kind of a tough time getting rid of them. They have simple eyes, but their number does vary. They don't all have two. Some of them have many more, but they are found in an even number typically because they are bilaterally symmetrical. And these guys could be anything from spiders and scorpions, things that are super dangerous, to mites and ticks, things that are much smaller, although ticks can be very dangerous if they carry Lyme's disease. Our last group, which is our largest group, is the insects. These guys have 3 body parts. You guys did a huge project with these in the fall, so you're very familiar with a bunch of insect subcategories, the different orders of insects that we classified. So head, abdomen, thorax for their 3 body parts. The pin always went through the thorax of our critter, that middle body section. They have compound eyes, so they're getting multiple pictures. That's an advantage to help them avoid predators. They do have different kinds of mandibles. If you look at like a cricket here, they have chewing mandibles versus something like a butterfly, which has that long proboscis that acts more like a straw. So lots of different kinds of mandibles on each of these critters. They all have 6 legs, 2 antennae, 1 pair, 2 antennae. Most of them have wings, some don't. Most of them have 2 pairs of wings, except for our fly group, Diptera. If you remember, they only have 1 pair of wings. And that's an easy way to tell the difference between some flies that look a whole lot like bees, but are not bees. So as we're looking at how living things change over time, how they reproduce and grow and develop, some of those characteristics of living things. Most of our arthropods are going to do, especially in the insect group, are going to do complete metamorphosis. So they're going to go through 4 stages, from egg to larva to pupa to adult. And you guys are probably very familiar with this. Most of you probably did some experiments with monarch butterflies when you were little and watched them make their beautiful chrysalis that has golden dots on it, and they change from that yellow, black, and white striped caterpillar into the beautiful orange, black, and white adult. However, there are some less complicated procedures for metamorphosis, and we call that incomplete metamorphosis, and that only has 3 stages, and they're actually missing a middle stage. Instead of going from egg to larva to pupa to adult, these guys go from egg to nymph, and that nymph phase just looks like a baby adult. They look very, very similar to their adult version of themselves, rather than looking so different like a caterpillar to a butterfly. These guys, this is a beetle, a milkweed beetle, they look very much like their adult form when they're in the nymph stage, and they just keep growing and molting or shedding their skin, growing and molting and growing and molting until they get to their adult size. And each of those little sheds, each of those little stages is called an instar. And different kinds of insects will have a different number of molting or instar phases. So you may hear on, like, if you watch Bones, old episodes of Bones, one of the scientists was always looking at fly larvae to determine how long a body has been there. And so they'll look at what stage, what nymph stage or what instar stage the fly larvae are, and that can determine how long they've been there. So it's a very predictable cycle that goes from egg to nymph to adult. So things like grasshoppers, crickets, some beetles, they'll go through incomplete metamorphosis. So just a quick comparison from incomplete to complete metamorphosis. We have just 3 stages, egg to nymph to adult, versus 4 very distinct stages, egg, larvae, pupa, adult. So these guys look very different throughout the 4 stages of their life cycle, whereas these guys look very similar throughout their 4 stages, or pardon me, 3 stages of their life cycle. So that's just a quick rundown of arthropods. We'll be working a lot more with different kinds of arthropods this week. Make sure you do a good job taking your notes. Make sure they're complete. Put them in the rings of your binder at the back of your notes and handout section. Add them to your table of contents, and you guys are done. Good job.